He was the kind of cop people trusted at first glance, the kind with a firm handshake, a steady voice, and the kind of smile that made you believe the city was still holding itself together. His badge shined, his cases got solved, his name was spoken with respect in neighborhoods that didn't respect much of anything. Detective Marcus Hale, a man the city needed, a man the city was proud of. But cities have a way of hiding their truth beneath pavement and neon and noise. And men like Marcus, when they fall, don't fall suddenly. They don't crumble like buildings in storms. They erode, quietly, silently, piece by piece, until the person looking back at them in the mirror is someone they don't recognize, and someone they don't hate enough to change. Some people said the city made him this way, others said he was always waiting for a reason. The truth lived somewhere in between. There were nights when the streets were quiet enough that you could still hear the old city, the forgotten one, breathing beneath the asphalt. On nights like that, Marcus would drive with the windows cracked just enough to let the wind cut through the silence, his hand steady on the wheel, his eyes on a horizon he could never quite reach. He remembered when he cared, when justice was something that felt clean, when the job meant protecting people, not controlling them, when the badge felt like a promise, not a weapon. But memories are fragile things. The city teaches you quickly. People lie, evidence disappears, and the criminals with the most power never get booked. And somewhere along the way, Marcus learned the lesson that ended him long before anyone else knew it had happened. If the system can be bent, the man who learns how to bend it controls everything, and so he did. He learned which judges liked their envelopes thick. He learned which gang leaders could be reasoned with and which needed to be shown blood to understand. He learned that fear was faster than trust, and profit lasted longer than pride. He learned that justice could be bought, and he learned the price. But the city has patience. It watches, it waits, and it remembers every sin it has ever witnessed. One day it would remember Marcus Hale. And when the city comes to collect what it is owed, nobody escapes. Rain started with no warning, the kind that makes a city sound like it's whispering to itself. Marcus watched it from the precinct steps, a takeaway coffee warming his palm, the steam coiling into the damp like a secret trying to return to wherever it was born. He took one sip, tossed the rest into a trash can, and headed inside. The day smelled like wet uniforms and old paper. He liked that smell. It covered everything else. Briefing was brief. A burglary string downtown. A missing kid from the East Flats. A memo about body cam compliance no one would read. The captain's voice droned. Pens scratched. Fluorescent lights buzzed just off key. Marcus stood in the back, hands in his pockets, looking like he didn't need to hear any of it and would still know more than anyone when it counted. That was part of the performance. Appear omniscient, and people will supply you with everything you've missed. She noticed him noticing. Officer Naomi Serrano. New to the room, not new to the world. She stood near the front, tall, steady, the calm you only get by surviving something you don't talk about. Her uniform fit like she'd been measured for the idea of law itself. She didn't stare. She glanced once, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and faced forward again. The look was surgical, the exact length required to collect information, not a heartbeat more. He filed her away under the mental drawer he labeled risk. After briefing, he caught her in the hallway. "Serrano," he said, as if they were old colleagues, as if her name belonged to him now. "You're riding with Delgado today?" "That's the assignment," she said. Her eyes were brown and unblinking. "Trade," he said lightly. "I'll take you out. Show you the city without the tourist brochure." She read the angle and didn't move. "I'm fine with my assignment, detective." "That wasn't a question," he said. He gave her the kind of smile that passed for friendly in a building where friendliness could be mistaken for weakness. "Delgado won't mind." Delgado minded, but he minded Marcus less. 15 minutes later, Naomi sat in Marcus's unmarked sedan, the wipers squeaking a rhythm across a windshield studded with city. He drove without the radio. He liked the silence. It left room for leverage. "Nervous?" he asked as they hit a corridor of warehouses that always smelled like metal and regret. "No," she said. "Should I be?" "Depends," he said. "You from here?" "Closer than you think." "People say that like a threat," he said. "Only when they're listening," she said, eyes still on the window. He hid a smile. She wasn't afraid, and she wasn't trying to prove it. That was the rare combination. He took them past the docks where cranes stabbed at the sky like skeletal hands, then cut through an arcade of shuttered storefronts and out toward an underpass where people lived in weatherproof tents that were never weatherproof enough. He didn't narrate. He let the city tell its own story. He stopped at a light as a boy on a BMX bike threaded through cars like a fish through reeds. The kid tapped Marcus's fender with 2 fingers, street blessing, and rode on. Naomi watched the boy fade into rain. "How old?" she asked. "Old enough to owe somebody something," Marcus said. You going to tell me why we're nowhere near our patrol grid? She asked, casual as a question in a kitchen. Field trip, he said. I want to see how you handle noise. They pulled behind a shuttered seafood market, the aluminum door tagged with a riot of color that named a crew only the city cared to remember. A man stepped out of a side door with a cigarette and the posture of someone who'd learned to stand where cameras weren't. He saw Marcus and exhaled a smile. Detective Hale, he said. You're bringing company now? Company learns quick, Marcus said. Where's Joe? In the back, counting the uncountable. They were inside before Naomi had time to register how easily the door opened. The back room smelled like old ice and cash, a folding table, 2 men, a scale, shrink-wrapped packages that were either food for people who could still afford food or not food. The taller of the 2 men had a scar across his lip like someone had tried to erase his mouth and failed. He nodded at Marcus. You're early, the man said. Your clock's slow, Marcus said. He turned to Naomi as if this were all perfectly normal. Officer Serrano, meet Joe Mills. Joe's an entrepreneur, diversified portfolio. Naomi let the silence hang just long enough to say she could end it any time she wanted. What portfolio is that, Mr. Mills? She asked, voice level, hands empty, eyes everywhere. The kind that keeps the lights on, Joe said, blinking too slowly. Detective, we good? Let's see, Marcus said. He walked to the scale, lifted one package, set it down again. He didn't have to act like he knew what he was doing. He did know. You're heavy. Trying to impress me? Trying to be respectful? Joe said, well, we all want the same thing, right? We do, Marcus said. He looked at Naomi. You see it? I see a lot, she said, and Marcus wasn't sure if that was a warning or a promise. He took an envelope, thumbed it open, glanced inside. Cash stared back. Enough to build a little house out of wrong answers. He closed it, slid it under his jacket, and tapped the table twice with 2 fingers like a priest finishing a benediction. Stay boring, Joe. Always, Joe said. They were halfway back to the car when Naomi spoke. You make a habit of extorting small business owners? She asked, voice a knife wrapped in cotton. You make a habit of speaking without evidence? He replied. You're right, she said. I don't have evidence yet. He put the car in gear and didn't look at her. Careful with yet. It sounds like you think the world is waiting to be arranged around your conscience. She turned her head just enough for him to see the ghost of a smile. Careful with world. It sounds like you think you own it. The rain thinned to a mist that made the city look like a memory. Dispatch called out a disturbance near a block where everything was always a disturbance. Marcus took the turn fast. They arrived to find a crowd forming around a corner bodega, 2 teenagers shouting, a woman on the ground holding her wrist, an older man, owner probably, standing between the teenagers and his store like he'd been practicing that pose all his life. Naomi was out of the car before Marcus killed the engine. She moved through the crowd like water through stone, no pushing, no shouting, the kind of presence that makes space by making people want to give it. Back up, she said calmly. Give her air. She knelt by the woman and checked the wrist. Sprain, she told Marcus without looking at him. We need EMS. Marcus talked to the teenagers. He didn't ask questions. He made statements. You were stealing. He grabbed you. You pushed her. He watched their eyes for the moment they broke. One did. The smaller one. He had the look of someone who had learned early that confession was currency, and that currency could be traded for mercy if you were lucky. We didn't mean, the smaller one began. Meaning's free, Marcus said. Consequences cost. Naomi finished with the woman, got her seated on a crate, asked someone to bring water that wasn't from the bodega's shelf. She stood and faced the boys. Who's hungry? She asked. They looked at her like it was a trick. Which one of you ate this morning? She asked. No one raised a hand. She nodded, turned to the owner. Can we make them a sandwich? She asked. We'll settle up. This is not a soup kitchen, the man snapped. Anger a shield over fear. I know, she said gently. It's your store, your rules. I also know these 2 are going to keep stealing from you until one of you does something you both regret. Let me buy us 10 minutes of calm. The owner hesitated, then shrugged at the ceiling. 1 sandwich each, he said, hiding compassion inside a frown. The boys looked away to hide something else. Marcus watched all of it with the detachment of a man who had once done this dance and now preferred other dances, the kind with simpler steps. Naomi had the boys sit in the doorway and eat. She took their names, wrote them down slowly, spelled them back to them like a teacher who expects the future to be longer than today. The crowd dissolved when there was nothing to watch but hunger being less hungry. In the car, Naomi said, You could have cuffed them. And then? He asked. And then maybe they learn sooner that some mistakes aren't worth the price, she said. Or maybe they learn sooner that a record means no job, no rent, no patience, Von, he said, and then we see them again, but older. So you do remember, she said, more to herself than to him. Don't get sentimental, he said. It's expensive. They drove. The rain stopped as if it had been told to. Some pushed through like it didn't know better. The city steamed. He dropped her at the precinct for report time and kept going. He didn't need to be seen with her more than necessary. She had a way of making cameras notice. He took the long way toward the river and parked beneath a freeway where pigeons owned the daylight. He checked his mirrors. A second car pulled in. Dark, anonymous, the kind that looks like every car and no car. Vargas slid behind the wheel of Marcus's sedan without ceremony. Men like him skipped the hello. They didn't need the practice. You brought her to Joe's, Vargas said, not a question. She needed an education, Marcus said. She's the wrong student, Vargas said. She writes everything down. You have a solution you're about to pretend you don't enjoy suggesting, Marcus said. Vargas's smile was a blade without light. Misunderstood traffic stop. Body cam that malfunctions. File that falls behind a cabinet until no one remembers why the cabinet matters. Marcus stared at the stained concrete and counted backward from 10. No. You going soft? Vargas asked. She's a cop, Marcus said. So are you, Vargas said, as if that were the punchline in the joke. Marcus flexed his hands slow on the wheel. She's not the kind you can bury. If she disappears, people will dig. And when people dig, they find bones we didn't know we had. Vargas adjusted his cuff, a gesture that meant patience expiring. We pay you to prevent problems, not philosophize about their souls. You pay me to keep your name off paper, Marcus said, and I do. But I don't create bonfires to warm your hands. You think you still decide the temperature, Vargas said. That's cute. Marcus turned his head. Pick another cop, scare them, plant dope. Anonymous tip. They'll make her look reckless. She'll be busy staying employed while we do what we do. Vargas considered this and nodded once, as if approving a child's arithmetic. We'll stage her. She'll come out clean, but dirty for a week, long enough. Don't overplay, Marcus said. She'll survive it.
Vargas
then she'll
said,
remember,
stepping out.
And she'll wait longer than
Some
you
of
think
us
to return the
them with
favor.
interest. Marcus sat alone after Vargas left and watched a pigeon hop in a circle like it had lost the geometry of walking. He realized his pulse was up and let it fall. He didn't like improvisation when the variables had names. At dusk, the city turned the color of a bruise and hummed like someone practicing an apology. Marcus drove nowhere in particular until his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered with the practice nothing in his voice he used for strangers. Detective Hale? A woman asked. Not Naomi, older, tired. I've been told you help people when the others can't. He almost laughed at the phrasing. Who told you that? Someone who said you wouldn't ask. I just did, he said. Silence. Then, my son. He missed a court date. He doesn't do well with people. They're talking about putting him somewhere far. Marcus pictured 1,000 stories like this one. Some true. Some leverage wearing a mother's voice like a mask. Name? She gave it. He recognized it. Not from lists that matter to good men, but from lists that matter to men like him. The son was a runner for a crew that bought wholesale from a warehouse that paid protection in cash and information. Information had dried recently. A mother's fear could irrigate a drought. Where are you? He asked. She told him. He drove. A walk-up that smelled like detergent and loss. She opened the door and looked like every mother whose OS used a dozen names for prayer and found none of them answered. He stepped inside, took measure. Photos on a shelf. The missing son in 3 ages that looked like the same day repeated. He's not a bad boy, she said. He doesn't know how to be in rooms. He knows how to be in the right ones, Marcus said, scanning. He run for Santo? She flinched at the name. He carries boxes sometimes. Boxes have friends, Marcus said. He walked to the window and looked at the street. A sedan sat too still across from the building. No one inside, or someone who knew how to be invisible. He caught a reflection, a glint he knew belonged to a lens. He stepped away from the glass. You call anyone else? He asked. Just you, she said. A woman officer gave me your number. He paused. What woman? She said she works with you, Naomi. She said you
You know how to talk to people like my son." He didn't show the shiver that ran through him. He smiled instead. "She's good." "She said you have a way," the mother whispered. "I do," he said. He gave her a phone number that wasn't his, told her to call it in the morning, promised he'd look. Promises are cheap when you don't intend to spend them. Back on the sidewalk, he stood in the humid dark and let the street speak. The too-still sedan, the lens, the way the air changed when someone was close who didn't want to be seen. He moved like a man who'd forgotten he was being watched. He turned the corner and was gone before the watcher remembered how to follow. He cut through an alley and slipped behind the sedan, crouched low. The dash cluster glowed cold. No one inside. Dead drop surveillance, a camera mounted in the dash, motion activated, feeding somewhere he wouldn't see until he made a mistake. He looked up. On the third floor, a window blind angled wrong and corrected too slow. He smiled in the dark. He didn't look at the blind again. He walked to his car like he owned the night. He drove to a strip of bars whose lights tried too hard. He parked behind a dumpster that smelled like lemons trying to be brave. He pulled out his second phone and typed, "You're clumsy. Meet me where eyes go to sleep. Midnight. Come alone." He sent it to the number he delifted from Naomi A.'s personnel file the day after she introduced herself to his attention. He waited without waiting. He let the city do the part of the work it always did, carry the message through currents he didn't have to see. Midnight came. The rain decided it had done enough and let the air have itself back. The location he saw Dee chosen was a forgotten overpass, where the freeway murmur became white noise and bench sleepers knew the angle that kept you warmer than you'd expect. He stood by a pillar tagged with names that no names belonged to anymore. Footsteps approached, confident and unhurried. Naomi stepped into the wash of a street lamp's faint spill, hands visible, sleeves rolled once, nothing in her posture that asked permission. "You called?" she said. "You answered," he said. "You wanted alone," she said, glancing once to his right where he had left a gap as a test. "You are." "You set the mother on me," he said. "I gave her your number because I thought maybe you still did the part of the job that is hard," she said.
"You're following me?" he said. "I'm watching patterns," she said. "You installed a camera opposite her building," he said. "I noticed one," she said. They stood in the almost dark and tested how much truth the other would tolerate. "You're going to find a way to charge me," he said. "Process, hearings, career suicide by 1,000 memos. I'm going to find a way to stop you," she said. "However long that takes." "You think time is on your side," he said. "I think route spreads," she said. "And I think it stops when you cut it out." He smiled, and for a second, he looked like the man on the recruitment poster he used to be, if you tilted your head and forgave the edges. "You don't win by cutting," he said. "You win by growing around the thing and starving it. Then watch me grow," she said. A train screamed somewhere close enough to make the bridge vibrate. The sound passed through them and kept going. "Go home," he said. "Make me," she said, but she turned anyway. She walked back into the dark the same way she came out of it, like the dark had a deal with her. He watched her go and, for the first time in a long time, did the arithmetic of risk and found the sum leaning away from him. He had always trusted two things, his ability to predict and his ability to punish. Naomi Serrano wasn't predictable. Punishing her would teach the city to look at him again. He needed something cleaner. The cleaner thing arrived on its own. 2 days later, a viral clip lit up phones in 3 precincts and 1,000 apartments. Body cam footage. Shaky, breathless, the kind people forward before they ask if it's real. It showed Naomi in a hallway arguing with a teenager, then stepping too close, then the kid shoving her, then her shoving back, then a cut, then a caption, "Officer loses control." The clip ended on her face mid-breath, which they froze so she looked feral. Marcus watched it twice, then again frame by frame, and smiled without joy. The edges were wrong. It had been spliced. The hallway was one he knew, a project building where friction was oxygen. He could see a shoe he recognized. A red high top with a logo older than the kid wearing it. He'd seen that shoe in a stairwell last week belonging to a runner for Joe Mills. Sloppy work. Amateur hands stitching a professional smear. He didn't call Naomi. He didn't need to. The city was calling her enough. He texted Vargas. Too loud. Pull back. Vargas replied with a photo of a chessboard and no text. Marcus stared at the bishop pinned to a corner and wanted to throw his phone into the canal. He went to the hallway in the clip. The building smelled like spilled soda and the shadow of bleach. A girl on the second-floor landing filmed him with her phone openly. "You a good cop or a bad one?" she asked. "I'm a busy one," he said. She laughed like a cough. "That the same thing?" He found the boy with the red shoes on the third floor, sitting like a dropped thought outside an apartment whose door was a lattice of deadbolts. The boy looked up and flinched at recognition. "I need the rest of the video," Marcus said, and crouched to make the world smaller. "The part where she calms you down." "The part they cut." The boy stared at the floor. "I don't have it." "You don't now," Marcus said. "But you did. Who paid you?" The boy's eyes slid toward the end of the hall, the way eyes do when fear forgets good manners. Marcus followed the glance and saw a figure at the stairwell door, a silhouette with shoulders like sure decisions. The figure held up a phone and winked. Then he vanished down the stairs the way water disappears into a crack. Marcus stood and stepped faster. He hit the stairwell and heard the echo of footsteps 2 flights below. He didn't run. He let the rhythm tell him, turn, land, door slam. He hit the ground floor as a door swung back from fresh air. Outside, a black sedan idled with 2 men inside, not interested in idling. The passenger looked up, met Marcus's gaze, and tapped 2 fingers against his temple, as if saluting a teacher he planned to fail. The sedan slid into traffic. Marcus memorized the smear of numbers on the plate, even as rain returned and erased ink from the world. He stood in the wet and realized something he should have remembered sooner. When you build your life on leverage, you get very good at lifting what isn't yours. You forget that sometimes the weight is your own. And when someone else has their hands under it, you fall the same way everybody else does. He went back inside. He handed the boy a card with a number Naomi would answer. "If you decide you're tired of being used," he said, "call this. You work with her?" The boy asked, suspicious and young and older than he should have been. "Sometimes," Marcus said. "Sometimes I work against her. Today I'm working with gravity." The boy frowned at the card like it might burn him, then tucked it into his shoe, which was probably the safest place in the building. Marcus left through the back so the building didn't have to watch him think. He walked until the city changed masks and became waterfront instead of brick. He breathed the wet metal air and tried to imagine a future where Naomi Serrano lost. He couldn't, not because he lacked imagination, because he had finally found a line he didn't want to cross, and it terrified him to know it had always been there. He was deciding what that meant when his phone buzzed with a number that meant trouble carefully folded. He answered, said nothing. A voice he'd hoped to never hear again filled the line. Smooth, educated, wrought in a tailored suit. "Detective Hale," Leon Vargas said, like the words tasted expensive. "We should talk about loyalty." Marcus watched a ferry churn the river into temporary handwriting. "We're talking." "Not like this," Vargas said. "In person, at our usual place. Come alone. What if I don't?" Marcus asked. "Then I make sure what you love most learns what it costs to be adjacent to you," Vargas said. "And before you pretend there's nothing you love, remember, you're a liar even to yourself." The line died with the kind of finality only cowardice enjoys. Marcus put the phone away and felt the city tilt a degree toward whatever came next. He caught his reflection in a storefront window and didn't recognize the man's eyes. He looked tired, and not from lack of sleep. He turned toward the docks, where the water would say what it always said to men who thought they had learned how to walk on it. Careful. Marcus walked toward the docks with his coat pulled tight, not against the cold, but against the feeling crawling up his spine, the sense that someone else now held the rhythm of his heartbeat. The city smelled like diesel and dead tides, and the sky had the color of an old bruise. Cargo cranes rose like metal skeletons against the harbor lights, and the water slapped the pilings with slow, indifferent patience. Vargas chose this place for a reason. People disappeared here, not because someone killed them, because the city simply forgot them. Marcus stopped at the edge of an abandoned slip, where the concrete had cracked like old bone. A single light flickered, buzzing with insects that didn't know how to leave. Vargas leaned on a rusted railing, coat immaculate, shoes dry despite the puddles. Men like him never touched the world they dirtied. You came alone, Vargas said, as if approving a student's work. You asked nicely, Marcus replied. Vargas smiled, jaw barely shifting. The kind of smile carved from money and other people's pain. You're losing your balance, Marcus. You used to understand the game. I understand it better than you think, Marcus said. Do you? Vargas asked, stepping closer. Because when a rookie officer threatens you, you don't remove her. You test her, break her. Make her understand what obedience costs. But you, he tapped Marcus's chest lightly, you let her breathe. That tells me something has changed. Marcus didn't blink. What you call obedience, others call fear. Fear keeps cities standing, Vargas said. Fear pays mortgages. Fear elects judges. Fear is the currency we trade in because it never loses value. Marcus didn't bother responding. Vargas wasn't looking for dialogue. He was carving a stage. You forget who put you in this world, Vargas said. Who protected you when Ea came sniffing? Who gave you names? Who gave you leverage? Marcus didn't look away. I know exactly who did all that. Then show loyalty, Vargas said. Remove Serrano, cleanly, quietly, before she becomes something harder to scrape off. There it was. No metaphor, no dance, just an order. Marcus's jaw flexed once. No, the air changed. Subtle, cold, like someone pulled a thread that held the room's temperature together. Vargas's smile didn't fade, it sharpened. Then you misunderstand the situation. You're not refusing me. He leaned in. You're replacing yourself? Marcus knew that tone, not a threat. A declaration. Vargas never bluffed. And that meant footsteps behind him, very light, very controlled. Someone who knew how to walk quietly. Marcus didn't turn. Didn't breathe too loud, just listened. A soft click of metal against cloth, the kind that comes when someone draws a gun from inside a coat, not to aim, but to ready. Marcus spoke slowly. You bring muscle now? I thought we had respect. Vargas sighed as if Marcus had disappointed him socially, not mortally. Respect is expensive. You've become cheap. Marcus moved on instinct honed from years of rooms that wanted him dead. He pivoted just enough to see the reflection in the dark window of a warehouse door, tall, strong, shaved head, shoulders that meant time inside. The gun lifted. Marcus threw himself sideways. The gunshot split the quiet dock like thunder, cutting open silence. Sparks flew from the railing. Marcus hit the concrete and rolled behind a rusted forklift. Another shot. Metal shrieked. Vargas didn't yell stop, he never yelled. He watched, calm, like he was observing weather. Marcus slid out low, grabbed a loose length of pipe from the ground, and came up fast. The gunman adjusted, good stance, solid aim, but too confident. Marcus swung the pipe into his wrist. The shot went wild, clanging off a shipping container. The gunman grunted, stumbled, and Marcus drove his elbow into the man's throat. Not to kill, to drop him. The man hit the ground, gasping. Marcus picked up the fallen gun. Vargas didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even raise his hands. Now what? Vargas asked softly. You shoot me? In front of a camera you didn't notice on the pole behind you. Self-defense won't save you from what this looks like. Marcus didn't turn to check. He didn't need to. Vargas didn't lie, not about things like that. He lowered the gun an inch. Vargas stepped closer until they were close enough to breathe the same cold. Your story is over, Vargas whispered. You just haven't accepted the ending yet. Marcus didn't speak, because he knew he couldn't win with words. He also knew something Vargas didn't. Marcus Hale never accepted the first ending handed to him in his life. He turned and walked away, quiet, controlled, not because Vargas won, but because Marcus had just decided how Vargas would lose. And this time, it wouldn't be fast dot, it would be earned dot by the time Marcus reached his car. The rain had started again, not the soft kind. Kind that erases footprints, the kind that cleans blood. Kind that starts revolutions one drop at a time. He sat behind the wheel and dialed a number he had never used. Naomi answered on the second ring. You were right. Marcus said. Naomi didn't sound surprised. What changed? Marcus looked at the dog behind him without turning his head. I did. Naomi didn't ask for details. Where are you? Moving, Marcus said, eyes on the mirror. Vargas tried to close my tab. He's escalating. He'll stage me before sunrise. You armed? Yes, lose it, she said. You walk into a camera with a gun tonight? You'll be headline, not evidence. He exhaled once, slow, and slid the pistol into the glove box, then into the spare tire well, then drove 2 blocks and ditched it in a storm drain he knew better than his own address. The rain swallowed the drop like it was rehearsed. Okay, he said. You want me clean? Tell me how we do this. We don't arrest Vargas, Naomi said. We bankrupt him. We make him radioactive. He survives handcuffs. He doesn't survive sunlight. How? We follow his money and burn his oxygen. Marcus turned onto an avenue that glittered with oil-slick rainbow. You think I don't know his accounts? I think you know his accounts he wants you to know, she said. The ones he keeps for leverage? Not the ones he keeps for life. Where do we start? Not with him, she said. With his shadow. The lawyer. Marcus almost smiled. Kaufman. Yeah, Naomi said. The man who launders empathy into retainers. He's got a vault with everything Vargas is afraid of. We open it, the city watches him bleed out slowly. Kaufman runs airtight, Marcus said. He's got privilege tattooed on his bones. Good thing we don't need his words, just his habits, Naomi replied. Meet me at 4th and Klein, 10 minutes. She hung up. Marcus drove without thinking about the fact that he was taking orders from the one person he planned to bury. The city's grid smeared by rain. Lights cycled with empty patience. He pulled under a dead billboard where the freeway hum makes your thoughts vibrate. Naomi stepped out of a civilian sedan in a dark jacket, hair tucked, eyes clear. She carried a small duffel and a look that said she'd already done this in her head 3 times. Can you follow instructions? She asked. On good days, he said. Consider this one of them, she said, and handed him a folded hoodie, a ball cap, and nitrile gloves. We're going to take a walk. Where? Past Kaufman's office, she said. Not in. We spook him, he tightens. We watch his routine from outside. We learn his tells. Then we cut where he bleeds. Gloves, she said. He pulled them tight. They lifted pages, names, dates, retainer amounts. Shell LLCs that looked like bland high-rise addresses. Routing numbers. A side column labeled Samaritan with 6 entries. Blackmail fund, Marcus said softly. Naomi nodded. Kaufman gets donations to a charity that doesn't exist. Money travels through stops, then lands at Monty's capital. Monty's, Marcus said, the syllable sour. That's Vargas's vault. Exactly, Naomi said. We cut Monty's, everything collapses. But we don't take it to the captain or the day. Who then? Marcus asked, wary of the trap he knew public virtue often became. People who hate Monty's more than they love us, Naomi said. Regulators, controllers, the kind who wear boring suits and ruin exciting men. Your contact? She nodded. He owes me a favor from before you and I were a problem for each other. Then make the call, Marcus said. She didn't reach for her phone. Not yet. One more step. We need a clean chain. We need to show that Vargas uses police to protect the pipeline. We need you on tape saying what you've done. Marcus's jaw worked. You want a confession? I want a confession to me, she said. Not to a microphone in a room I don't control. You give it, and I give it back to you in the end. But I need your voice telling the truth so no one can say this was my crusade. This is yours. He stared at the concrete pillar until the speckles of aggregate looked like stars. You know what happens to cops who confess? You're not a cop in this story, she said softly. You're the fuse. Fuses burn. And light, she replied. He weighed the choice like a man balances on a railing between buildings. What do you need me to say? The truth, she said. The names you took. The envelopes you opened. The raids you steered away. The mothers you lied to because the sons they begged for were more valuable scared than safe. He let the words swing. They hit like weather. You'll get your truth, he said, and tasted copper. They resealed the box with clean tape Naomi produced like a magician with administrative magic. She slid it into her trunk beside a folded blanket and a first aid kit. The normalcy of those neighbors comforted him for reasons he didn't examine. Vargas will look for you first, she said. He'll put eyes on your apartment, your car, your favorite diner. Go nowhere familiar. Call nobody you love. Nobody, he said, and tried to remember who qualified. She handed him a burner phone packed in rice. I'll text the address for tonight. We do the recording there. You get one last choice, anonymous room or your own voice in your own place. My place is wired, he said. Good, she said. Let him listen. They split her into light, him into shadow, like they'd agreed on roles ahead of time. He drove for an hour with no direction, letting instinct burn itself down into something calmer. Twice he looped back to watch his own tail. Once he stopped and let a bus block the view of anyone behind him. Finally, he parked beneath a hospital's loading dock and slept for 20 minutes with his hands folded, like a man who knew prayer but wouldn't use it at nightfall. The text came, 11 o'clock, Unit 3B, come alone. Bring nothing that can betray you. He went. Unit 3B was a furnished vacancy-staged art on the walls. Couch that had never heard an argument, books a set designer chose for color rather than citation. Naomi had set a single lamp on the floor and draped a towel over it to make kinder light. A digital recorder sat on the coffee table. She sat in a chair, elbows on knees, eyes steady. You ready? She asked. No, he said. Start. He spoke. He talked until his voice felt like gravel. He named the early favors, the first envelopes, the meetings that felt like choices and were actually doors swinging shut. He named Kaufman. He named Montes. He named the nights he showed up outside courtrooms to lose pieces of paperwork. The mornings he found evidence for men who paid for convenience. He described Vargas's orders and his obedience dressed as pragmatism. He described the boy with the red shoes, the mother, the storm drain swallowing metal and sin. He didn't look at Naomi while he did it. Looking at her would break the dam, and he needed the flood to finish the job it started. When he stopped, the room was the kind of quiet that makes you hear your blood. Naomi clicked the recorder off. She didn't speak for a full minute. You know what this costs? She said finally. I started paying a long time ago, he said. She nodded once, stood, moved to the kitchen counter, and slid the recorder into an envelope with a label already written. Office of the State Controller Financial Crimes. She sealed it, pressed it flat with her palm, and exhaled. Tomorrow morning. I walk this into a man who doesn't watch the news, she said. At noon, a judge you don't know signs a freeze order on Montes Capital. At 2, Kaufman's office receives a polite letter about an audit. At 3, Vargas starts to drown in paperwork. And me? Marcus asked. At 4, Naomi said. Yeah. Discovers an internal memo that puts you on paid leave pending an investigation into cases you've already confessed to. At 5, you go somewhere no one can find you for 48 hours. At 6, I sit down with a camera and tell the truth with names blurred and voices altered. At 8, the city starts to choose who it wants to be tomorrow. He stared at her. You've been waiting to do this. I've been waiting to do it with you, she said. Because criminals aren't scared of clean cops. They're scared of dirty ones who stop being dirty. He almost laughed. Instead, he looked at the lamp on the floor and said, Vargas won't go quietly. He brought a gun to a dock. He'll bring a match to a house. He's already bringing both, Naomi said, and picked up a phone buzzing where she'd left it face down. She read the text, jaw tightening. What? He asked. Vargas just filed a complaint through a proxy claiming I assaulted a juvenile and falsified reports to cover it. She said. He attached the edited hallway video. He CC'd 3 reporters. Your captain? Marcus asked. Already called, she said. Told me to come in at 8 sharp with counsel. Counsel? He said, a bitter smile flickering. Kaufman's busy. I'll bring truth, she said. It costs less. He stood. I won't let you walk into that alone. You will, she said. Because the only way this works is if you're a ghost until the freeze hits. Tonight, you disappear. Tomorrow, you watch the city remember its spine. What if it doesn't? He asked. Then we burn brighter, she said. And we go down honest? He reached for the door. She caught his sleeve. The touch was brief, professional, human. You did the hard part, she said. Don't do the dumb part now. He left. The hallway smelled like carpet cleaner and old arguments. On the stairs, he felt rather than heard the click of a camera shutter from the landing above. He didn't look up. He kept his head down and his hands visible and his speed unhurried. Outside, the rain had finally quit. The air felt scrubbed taut. He drove to a motel where Neon made promises it couldn't keep and paid cash for a room that came with a Bible and a chair that had seen better decisions. He placed the burner on the nightstand, sat on the bed, and listened to the building groan. He thought about justice like a body in recovery, shaky, stubborn, angry, healing in ugly stages. At 3:07 a.m. The burner VIBRATE. A single text from an unknown number. You're already dead. Only question is whether you make it useful. V. Marcus stared at it until the screen dimmed. He turned the phone off and lay back. Sleep approached like a dog you used to trust. At 7:58 a.m. Naomi walked into the precinct lobby wearing her uniform, a calm face, and a truth too heavy to carry alone. Reporters clustered outside like birds, convinced the glass will yield if they peck hard enough. Inside, the captain stood with a lawyer whose suit said he hated mornings and ideals in equal measure. At 8 a.m. The controller's clerk stamped an envelope with the state seal and began walking. Papers up a chain used to moving mountains one form at a time. At 9:42 a.m. Monty's Capital's accounts flickered on a dozen terminals and froze like a pond remembering. Had to be winter. At 10:15 a.m. Kaufman called Vargas and didn't get through. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. He sent a text that said, call me, and watched the 3 dots and never arrived. At 11:02 a.m. Vargas opened his office door to find 2 men in gray suits and calm eyes. They showed him credentials and the kind of smiles that mean we don't need to be liked to be permanent. At 11:19 a.m., a printer in the EA unit's corner spat out a memo that had been sitting in a drafts folder for months, waiting for the right combination of fear and paperwork. It named Marcus. It named cases. It named the rot in a tone so polite it sounded like congratulations. At 12:31 p.m., A user on a community forum posted the full hallway video, the uncut one. It showed Naomi de-escalating, the kid crying, the apology, the handshake, the dignity. The clip spread like a counterspell dot at 1:06 p.m. The city began to argue with itself in a way that felt like waking up dot at 2:40 p.m. Marcus heard the door to his motel room breathe as a shadow paused outside it. The handle trembled once, then stopped dot through the cheap wood. A voice like a razor whispered, "Detective Hale." Marcus stood without making a sound and moved to the side where hinges make you invisible. The voice continued. Soft, patient, smiling without lips. Time to choose who writes your ending. Equals, 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 equals. The door stayed closed, but the presence on the other side didn't move. It waited, breathing slow, controlled, as if the man behind the voice had all the time in the world. Marcus didn't speak. He moved silently to the knit stand, slid the lamp cord loose, and wrapped it once around his hand. A makeshift garrote if needed. A distraction at least. He could feel his heart working, not fast, not panicked, focused. The kind of heartbeat you get when your life has already changed and the rest of your body is just catching up. The voice outside chuckled lightly, as if amused. Still careful. I always liked that about you. Marcus knew the voice now. Not Vargas. Not one of Vargas's soldiers. This was Oren Vargas's collector. The man Vargas sent to make sure fear never got sloppy. Oren didn't yell. He didn't threaten loudly. He whispered promises into the ears of men who swore they'd never break, and by the time he stood up to leave, they were begging to tell him everything. Marcus stayed still. Oren spoke again. You're expecting a firefight, a raid, a door kicked. You think you're in the part of the movie where you and I destroy furniture? But see, his tone softened to a conversational murmur. I don't need to kill you. You've already killed yourself. You just don't know it yet. Marcus didn't answer. Oren continued. You think Naomi saved you. You think confession makes you clean. You think testimony makes you free. A slow inhale. But Marcus, no one comes back from being who you've been. The city doesn't forgive. It feeds. Marcus's hand tightened on the cord. His body was ready, waiting. Tell Naomi I said hello. Oren whispered. His footsteps moved away, not hurried, not cautious, casual. That was his power. Leaving threats unfulfilled. Letting the mind finish what the words started. Marcus waited a full 60 seconds before moving to the PEEICHOLE. Empty hallway. Flickering ceiling light. The smell of damp carpet. He dialed Naomi's burner. She answered on the first ring, voice low and breathless, like she was between decisions that could break worlds. Tell me you're alive. I had a visitor, Oren. He knows where I am. A silence sharp enough to cut through bone. He won't come back alone, she said. You need to leave, now. I'm not running, Marcus said. Yes, Naomi said, you are. You run tonight so the city has time to tilt. If you stay, they don't fear collapse. They celebrate your death. Marcus grabbed the burner, his jacket, nothing else. The lamp cord he unwound and left behind. He stepped into the hallway and locked the room out of habit like he'd return. Even though they both knew he wouldn't, he drove nowhere in particular. That was the point. Let no pattern root itself. The rain returned in thin slanted lines like the sky had forgotten how to fully commit to weather. He remembered something Oren said about death already being inside him and ignored it. He had done enough listening to ghosts. His phone buzzed again. Naomi. We have a time window. Vargas is boxed by the freeze. He'll surface. When he does, he'll try to move. We intercept him before he reaches the river. Marcus, where? Naomi. Pier 17, midnight. He'll go there to burn the last folder. If that folder goes up in smoke, Everything we built collapses, Marcus. I'll be there. The pier at night always smelled like salt, oil, and forgotten apologies. The lights along the water shook in the wind. Marcus parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, hands empty, steps measured. He didn't need weapons. He was the weapon, sharpened by guilt and clarity in equal measure. Naomi waited behind a shipping crate, jacket hood up, hair damp with fog. She didn't greet him. She didn't need to. They watched the pier. A black SUV pulled up. Vargas stepped out, coat tailored, shoes polished even in mud. Like vanity could survive collapse. He carried a folder, not a box. Not a hard drive. Paper that could end lives. Wait, Naomi whispered. Let him move out of open sight. If we rush now, we both die in the spotlight. Marcus nodded. His muscles were still, his breathing slow. Vargas walked toward the old incinerator feed chute, where trash fires had once kept dock workers warm in winters. He opened the folder. That was when Naomi moved, silent, quick, purpose carved into motion. Marcus followed without thinking. Their pace matched like choreography. They had learned from surviving the same city. Vargas didn't hear them. He didn't need to. Oren stepped from the shadows behind them, gun raised, expression calm. Marcus didn't hesitate. He didn't think. He just moved. He grabbed Naomi's shoulder and drove her sideways behind the crate as the gunshot tore through the air. Sparks burst from the metal. The bullet ricocheted. Naomi rolled. Marcus lunged. He hit Oren hard enough to knock the gun from his hand, but Oren didn't need a weapon to be lethal. His elbow snapped toward Marcus's jaw. Marcus ducked, absorbed the blow with his forearm, and drove his knee into Oren's ribs. Oren's breath broke sharp, but he smiled, a cold, delighted smile. Like violence was music he enjoyed hearing played back. You don't get to rewrite your ending. Oren hissed. Marcus slammed him into a shipping container. The metal rang like a bell. Naomi was already on Vargas. They struggled near the pier's edge. The folder bent, paper spilling into the wet wind. Vargas clawed, desperate now, dignity gone. He wasn't a king anymore, just a man watching his kingdom dissolve. Marcus felt Oren twist under him, body shifting like water. Oren's hand found something, a blade, small, hidden. It flashed up. Marcus caught his wrist. The 2 men froze. Strength against strength, the city holding its breath. Oren whispered, "You were supposed to be one of us." Marcus exhaled, and his voice was quiet. "I was. And that's why this ends." He forced Oren's hand downward. The blade entered Oren's own lung. Everything stopped. Just for a second, Oren's smile faltered, not from pain, from disbelief. Marcus stepped back as Oren slid to the ground. Naomi yelled his name. Urgent. Vargas had broken free and was running toward the pier's far ladder, the one that led down to the river barges where fire could disappear evidence forever. Marcus and Naomi ran. City wasn't watching. The city was holding its breath. The ending hadn't chosen its shape yet, but it was close, very close. The pier planks shook under their feet as they ran, the wood slick with mist and river spray. Vargas was faster than a man with his age and arrogance should have been, but fear has a way of sharpening limbs. He cut between rusted bollards and old ropes like he knew the docks by memory, which he did. These piers had built him. These piers would decide whether he lived long enough to see another sunrise. Naomi's breath was tight but steady. Marcus matched her stride without looking at her. They were 2 people who had once lived in opposite directions and were now aligned by the same gravity, the need to finish this. Not for justice, not for redemption, but because unfinished things become ghosts, and they were already carrying 2. Many. Vargas reached the ladder and started down, boots slipping on the wet metal. His hand gripped the folder tight. the papers inside fluttering with the winds like wings desperate to escape. Marcus didn't think. He didn't plan. He grabbed the railing and slid down the beams beside the ladder, landing on the barge deck with a thud that shot pain through his knees. Vargas spun, swinging the folder as if it were a weapon. For a moment, just a moment, his face showed something raw, something human: fear. Real fear, the kind that strips men of titles, money, reputations. The kind that remembers childhood nightmares. "You don't get to take this from me," Vargas shouted, voice cracking. "I built this city. I held it together when your badge was still shiny." Marcus said nothing. He stepped forward. Vargas lifted the folder above the open barrel fire. The flame reached like a hungry hand. Naomi dropped beside them, breath sharp. "If you burn that," she said, "the city doesn't collapse. You do, alone and painfully." Vargas's eyes flicked between them, calculating odds like a veteran gambler. His hand wavered, just slightly, and that was the moment. Marcus didn't attack. He simply stepped closer. Vargas stumbled back, his heel hit. A slick spot, his weight shifted. He slipped. The folder flew from his hand. Paper exploded into the air like snow. The river wind caught it. Pages whirled above the barge, dancing in slow spirals. A blizzard of confessions and bribes and signatures of men who thought they would never be touched by consequences. Some pages fell into the river. Some stuck to the pier pilings. Some fluttered against crates and lampposts. It didn't matter that they were scattered. It mattered that they were visible. A ripple of headlights glowed at the top of the pier. Naomi cursed under her breath. Reporters. Marcus looked up. Not reporters. The city. Phones in hands. Live streams already open. They had been followed. Or someone had tipped them off. It didn't matter. For once in this filthy story, the timing cut in the right direction. Vargas realized the same thing a heartbeat later. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He lunged to gather the pages. Hands shaking. Marcus didn't stop him. Naomi didn't either. Let the world see him. Beg for his power. Vargas fell to his knees, grabbing wet paper, tearing it, trying to hide it, trying to destroy it. His suit darkened with river grit, his composure gone. He looked small. He looked fragile. He looked like a man realizing the world had moved on without him. Someone on the pier yelled, "We're streaming." Another voice, "That's Vargas. Look at what he's holding." Naomi exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that breaks tension built over months. "It's done." "No," Marcus said softly. "Not yet." Vargas froze when he heard Marcus's tone. He lifted his head, his eyes wild. Wet, furious met Marcus's. "You think this makes you a hero?" Vargas spat. Marcus stepped closer, rain beating on his jaw. "No, I'm not a hero. I'm just the man who stopped being afraid of you." Vargas surged forward in a desperate swing. Marcus deflected him with almost gentle precision, guiding his momentum past, sending him stumbling not off the pier, not into the river, but down to the deck once more, where he stayed, chest heaving, exhausted. Defeated. Police sirens wailed in the distance, not the corrupt ones. Not Marcus's. These were the ones Naomi had called before they left. The ones who still believed the city could be more than what it had become. Naomi looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the river. The wind smelled like old metal and new beginnings. "Do we go with them?" she asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "No, we don't run. Not anymore." The first patrol cars pulled up. Officers stepped out cautious, unsure of the narrative, but eyes sharp. Cameras were still streaming. The truth was already loose, already alive, already impossible to bury. A sergeant approached them slowly. "Detective Hale, Detective Rivera, step away from the suspect." Naomi raised her hands. Marcus did too. Their palms were empty. Their faces were calm. The sergeant looked at Vargas, bleeding pride into the river breeze, surrounded by evidence he once believed untouchable. Jesus Christ, the sergeant whispered. Marcus spoke, voice steady. You'll want to collect the documents before the tide takes them. They're why we're here. The sergeant nodded, signaling officers to move. Not one person placed a hand on Marcus or Naomi. Not yet, because no one knew what to do with people who had been villains and saviors in the same breath. Marcus turned to Naomi. We're not done, he said. No, she said. But the city is. And for the first time in a very, very long time, the city felt quiet, not dying, not hungry. Just quiet, like it was listening, like it was waiting to decide what kind of place it wanted to be next. The city didn't sleep that night. It didn't riot either. It watched. Screens lit apartment windows from the inside like small aquariums of attention. Clips jumped from phone to phone, from stoop to subway, from bar to bedroom. Leon Vargas, on his knees at the water's edge, clawing at papers as if he could unspill them back into silence. The sound wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Shame travels well at low volume. By dawn, patrol units had cordoned the pier with tape and pragmatism. The river carried what it wanted. The rest lay on tarps, weighted with evidence markers like pinned butterflies. A lieutenant from financial crimes stood over the tarps with the reverence of a museum curator and the fatigue of a parent whose kids just discovered permanent markers. He kept saying, "Don't smudge the signatures," to nobody in particular. Marcus and Naomi gave statements separately, eyes dry, facts neat. They didn't perform. Performance is for the guilty or the glorious. They were neither. When Internal Affairs asked to clarify a few points, Naomi said yes and smiled politely, then placed a printed copy of the controller's freeze order on the table like a foundation stone. The ES sergeant stared at it the way men stare at weather they don't control. Kaufman arrived wearing an umbrella, the size of a conscience and a face set for sermon. He scanned the scene, took in Vargas, hunched on the bumper of a squad car with a foil blanket he didn't deserve, and calculated 6 outcomes before anyone greeted him. Then he turned, found a camera, and said, "No comment," with such gravity it sounded like testimony. By mid-morning, 2 council members issued statements about rooting out corruption and restoring trust. By lunch, a third released a photograph of himself shaking hands with a police academy graduating class 2 years ago. By evening, the mayor spoke into a lectern about sunlight. He used the word 3 times. He did not use the words Vargas or police at all. The city heard both anyway. The calls Marcus didn't answer multiplied. Old friends who had learned to look away now wanted to be seen looking at him. That's how cities survive their own scandals, by realigning themselves to yesterday's truth and pretending they were already facing that direction. Marcus turned the phone face down and left it humming on the motel vanity like a trapped insect. At 10 p.m. A news anchor with a careful voice narrated raw footage of the hallway video in its uncut length. Naomi standing between tension and its escalation. Her hands open, her tone soft, the boy's shoulders lowering by single breaths, the handshake, the departure. The anchor said, "Context matters," like he had always believed that. Comments flooded beneath with gratitude and with venom. Both sounded the same when scrolling fast, asterisk. Vargas made bail before midnight because men like him stockpile parachutes long before they jump. He stepped out of the courthouse into microphones and didn't speak, which is a kind of speech. Cameras found him anyway, found his suit, his jaw, his eyes not as certain as yesterday. He got into a car with windows that don't allow outsiders to do arithmetic with your face and vanished into the night that used to welcome him the next morning. The subpoenas began to bloom quiet as snow, relentless as spring. Bankers switched off their bravado and turned on their compliance training. A junior analyst at Monty's Capital spent 3 hours at a conference. room trying not to cry while showing regulators how a ghost charity fed an investment fund that fed a slush account that fed it. Collection of names spelled very carefully and always with middle initials. Kaufman's inbox filled with calendar holds labeled urgent privileged. His assistants brought him coffee and additional assistance. At noon, an email hit the department with the subject line, immediate administrative leave detective. Marcus Hale. It sounded like punishment and mercy wearing the same jacket. It meant no badge, no gun, no desk, no paycheck for now. He read it and felt nothing. You don't want stairs when the building's already fallen. He walked to the greenhouse behind. His building where a retired schoolteacher grew tomatoes like hope. The old man looked up, recognized the face from a phone he didn't love, and nodded like he would nod at a storm he couldn't stop. You watered? The old man asked, meaning the plants, meaning himself, meaning everything. Marcus turned on the hose and let the water thread itself around soil. He watched the dirt darken and tried to imagine a future where the ground held him. Naomi, meanwhile, sat in a narrow office at the controller's annex wearing a sweater she hadn't planned to wear and explaining to an auditor who had never once raised his voice how a city launders, invests, disguises, and spends fear. The auditor didn't blink much. He wrote, underlined, and hummed a bar of a classical piece Naomi couldn't name. When she finished, he said, "Thank you," as if she had carried something heavy across a room for him. Then he asked her to carry more. 3 days into the unraveling, the first plea came. Not from Vargas. From a broker 2 rungs down who understood that rats aren't noble, they're fast. He traded receipts for leniency and told the DA what the ledger already knew. Vargas didn't own the city alone. He rented it floor by floor. He paid superintendents to ignore leaks and inspectors to love their clipboards more than their eyesight. He paid a judge to treat the word continuance like a favor. He paid a union treasurer to forget arithmetic on the 3rd Thursday of every month. He didn't pay all of them much. He didn't have to. Corruption is cheaper than honesty when everybody thinks they're underpaid. The judge story stuck. The treasurer's story stuck harder. The union called a press conference and used the word betrayal 9 times and systemic none. Members stared at the pavement. Cameras stared at the microphones. The treasurer resigned to spend more time with family, which is what men say when they've already spent too much time with ghosts. Vargas tried to sue the controller for overreach. The judge assigned to the motion, who owed nobody a favor, looked over his glasses and said no. He didn't elaborate. The clerk typed the opinion with a small smile that felt like a private holiday. Internal affairs finally came for Marcus in person, not to arrest him, not to congratulate him, just to collect. They boxed his desk, photographed his locker, inventoried his sins with the same care they inventoried his awards. The ES sergeant who had once offered him a lifeline in a bar after a long day looked at him like a stranger looks at a mirror curious. Wary, unbelieving, "You could have said something sooner," the sergeant muttered. Not angry, just tired. "I did," Marcus said, and left it there because the rest of the sentence would require an ocean. He moved into a 1-room place over a laundromat where the machines made the kind of white noise therapists recommend and sleep ignores. He bought groceries like a man learning the concept: eggs, bread, tea. He wrote names on a legal pad and drew lines between them until the page looked like a city map of guilt. Then he stopped drawing and put the pad away, because some cartographies don't lead you home. The arraignment for Vargas drew a line around the courthouse with bodies. Some carried signs that said things like "city over bosses" and "no more tithes to fear." Some carried coffee and nothing else. A street musician played a horn off key and gorgeous. Inside, Vargas stood straight and did not look for cameras, because the cameras lived inside everyone now. He pled not guilty, as men do in the first act of this sort of theater. His lawyer spoke about due process with a sincerity purchased by retainer. The DA spoke about a pattern. The judge set dates like stakes in ground. The trial didn't come fast. Trials never do. The city learned to wait while pretending not to. It filled the waiting with analysis. Podcasts bloomed. Think pieces multiplied like well-fed cell cultures. A long-form magazine profile traced Vargas's childhood through alleys and modest kitchens, looking for the alchemy that turns hunger into empire. It found none. It found choices and chances and a willingness to make one mean the other. Naomi kept working, patrols, reports, audits, seizure receipts signed in ink that bled a little on humid days. She testified at a hearing with a voice that felt older than the calendar said she was. At night, she ran beside the river and counted her steps until numbers replaced anger. One evening, she stopped by the laundromat stairs and climbed to Marcus's door with a bag of groceries and a casserole she swore wasn't pity. He opened before she knocked because he had been sitting in the chair by the window listening to the neighborhood breathe. "You look tired," she said. "Setting the bag down." "I am," he said. "You eating?" She asked, "Less than my guilt, more than my pride," he said, and she snorted softly. They sat while the street below argued about parking. She told him about the audit's latest thread. He told her about a detective from Vice who had quietly turned over a set of burner numbers after seeing the peer video and deciding his mortgage could live without Vargas's shade. She told him the controller smiled once that morning. He told her he dreamed of drowning but woke dry. They didn't name the thing they were doing. It wasn't friendship yet. It wasn't penance either. It was something like sitting on the same side of a chessboard for the first time. The day jury selection began, Rain returned, polite at first, then committed. The courtroom had windows high enough to make weather. Metaphor. Vargas wore a dark suit that stopped being a statement and started being cloth. The jurors were 12 ordinary complications. One said she disliked cops. One said he built ships and bottles. One said he believed in capitalism. One said he didn't believe in men. They nodded when they were told to, and wrote when they were told to, and blinked. At the same rate as people who had not planned to hold a man's reputation between their ears for 6 weeks. The state started with money, because money doesn't forget. Wire transfers don't blush. Spreadsheets don't wonder if they're being unfair. A forensic accountant with a voice like sand walked the jury through a slideshow of numbers that told a story about appetite. The defense called it circumstantial. The accountant said, "Correct. Circumstances add up." Kaufman took the stand with posture that could support a roof. He said, "I don't recall," in 14 tonal variations, and offered privilege like a sacrament. The judge sustained, then overruled once to remind the room that he could. The jurors watched Kaufman's mouth and wrote nothing because some performances are their own. Cross-examination. A week later, a courier in a suit that didn't fit his hunger told the jury about white boxes labeled catering that were heavier than food. He cried in the middle of a sentence and apologized to the judge for crying. The judge said, "Take your time," and nobody in the room breathed for 5 full seconds. Then came the part trials are made of, the tape. Not a wiretap, those had tried. Not a sting, those had failed. The recording Naomi had made of Marcus confessing to her. The defense moved to exclude it because it was irrelevant to Vargas's guilt, because it was inflammatory, because it was everything but a weather report. The judge listened to arguments that used Latin and history, and then allowed a redacted portion with a caution to the jury about purpose and scope. The room tightened when the speakers clicked alive. Marcus's voice filled the air like a version of himself he wanted to disown and couldn't. He described meetings, distances walked in the rain, envelopes passed. He did not name Vargas directly in the portion aloud, but connections are bridges that jurors build without blueprints. Some looked at him where he sat behind the bar with a plain jacket and the posture of a man who would stand if asked. He didn't look back. He looked at the floor and felt shame. Choose a seat in his ribs again. The defense countered with character witnesses and reminders that the city is complicated. They called a pastor Vargas had donated to and a small business owner, whose lease had been extended when others weren't. They painted their client as a necessary, evil in a world built on unnecessary ones. The pastor spoke about Grace with a vocabulary even Grace looked surprised to hear Dot closing arguments. Arrived like weather long predicted. The DA didn't thunder. She spoke low and precise about choices and about the difference between complicated and corrupt. The defense widened its arms and tried to gather the city into a forgiving embrace the city hadn't asked for. The jury left. The room exhaled. The rain remembered its job. 2 days later, the jury returned, guilty on conspiracy, guilty on money laundering, guilty on 3 counts of bribery, not guilty on 1. Charge that required a leap only a playwright would make. No verdict is tidy. No verdict is enough. That verdicts are the language the city uses when it decides not to accept silence. Vargas didn't rage. He didn't collapse. He closed his eyes for the length of a breath and opened them older. The court officer stepped near him, not like a hunter near prey, but like a custodian near an overfull trash can. They let him out. Cameras saw it. The city saw the cameras seeing it. Naomi stood in the aisle until he was gone and let her hand find the back of a bench. She didn't cry. She did breathe. Sentencing came a month later with less spectacle and more math. The judge spoke about harm and pattern and the insult to public trust. He used a number of years that sounded like a sentence, not a statistic. He denied bail pending appeal. He pronounced conditions and dates and the end of a man's ability to decide when he wakes in the night. Vargas nodded twice as if agreeing to terms on a loan that would never be paid off. He left through a door that never leads to daylight when you want it. The city didn't celebrate. Not loudly. It adjusted. People went back to arguing about transit funding and schools and sports scores and whose neighborhood smelled like bread in the mornings. That's the strange mercy of a city. It is too busy to remember you forever. Internal affairs closed. Marcus's file with a recommendation that surprised. Nobody on board the rest. Termination. Referral to the DEA for review on charges lesser than the ones he'd helped prove, with the notation that cooperation was substantial and timely. The union offered him a lawyer with the enthusiasm of a dentist offering candy. He declined. He signed what needed signing. He accepted the thing he had built and the thing he had dismantled. On his last day in the building, he walked the hallway with its bulletin board of little victories and its vending machine that never quite returned correct change. He shook hands with 2 people who meant it and nodded at 3 who didn't. He emptied a desk that had already been emptied by other hands and left a pen in the top drawer because future men will still need ink outside. The air had that late afternoon glow where the city looks like it forgives. Naomi waited by the curb, jacket off, sleeves rolled, hair falling out of the tie she kept pretending could hold it. "You free?" she asked. He lifted an eyebrow. "I mean, right now," she said. "There's a place by the water that makes coffee that actually tastes like coffee." He smiled. "I don't deserve coffee." "Maybe not," she said. "But you can still drink it." They walked. The river didn't look cleaner. It looked honest. Boats moved because the city needs moving things. A kid threw crumbs at a gull and laughed when the gull pretended not to care before caring a lot. A couple argued in low tones about whether a plant could survive on their windowsill. The barista misheard both their names and wrote better ones on the cups anyway. Marcus held the paper cup and felt the heat and realized hands Remember warmth even when heads won't? Naomi sat, satchel by her ankle, eyes on the water. What happens to you now? She asked. I learned to live without the thing that taught me how to live, he said. And after that, I teach someone else how to see the lines before they cross them, he said. Maybe I drive a truck. Maybe I stack boxes. Maybe I speak to kids who think envelopes are gravity. You'll be good at the last one, she said. You'll be better at all of it, he said. They watched the ferries. He thought about the nights with Vargas and the mornings with the ledger and the moment when he had said no on the dock and how small that word had felt compared to the life it carried. He thought about Oren's whisper through the motel door, the promise that he was already dead. He had been wrong. Marcus hadn't died. He had been buried. There is a difference. They finished the coffee. She stood, slung the satchel. He stayed sitting a moment longer, then rose like an apology, taking human form, and walked with her back toward a city that had learned a few new words for itself. Months passed, as they always insist on doing. The trial became a documentary for people to fall asleep to with righteous dreams. The pier got new boards. The incinerator chute was welded shut and a plaque put up that simply said, "Here the city remembered." People took pictures there and didn't always know why it mattered. That is also how cities survive. Marcus found work with a nonprofit that called itself a reentry partner because second chances is a phrase people embrace until it involves someone they don't like. He taught workshops in a basement room with a leaky ceiling and a stubborn whiteboard about choices, about systems, about the feel of envelopes, about the shape of pressure, about how to stop before momentum carries you into the river. He wasn't inspirational. He was specific. Specificity saves people more often than speeches. Naomi made detectives sooner than the old rules allowed because the new rules realized old time frames were designed by men who liked their chairs. She kept the same desk and the same pen and the same habit of writing full names and not nicknames in reports. She partnered with a kid who reminded her of herself and taught him how to breathe before he spoke. She still ran by the river and still counted steps until numbers became prayer. One evening, nearly a year after the verdict, they met at the pier again. Not the old pier. A cleaned one, a bright one, the breath of new wood in the air. The plaque caught the last light of day and held it gently. They stood without nostalgia, which is a luxury you earn by telling the truth.
Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for part 2. It's coming soon, and I'd really love to hear from you. So drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from.